No mai hoku mai ki, quite simply politics. Welcome everyone. We're here for our fourth and final campaign election special, and I am joined with a man who I'm quite a massive fan of. I think he does some of the most incredible policy work that this country needs, and that is co-leader of the Greens Party, James Shaw. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming. What do you think of our little studio?
I love it. I love it. In fact, I want one all of my own.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you're more than welcome to come on Quite Simply Politics anytime you like.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Now, how has the election campaign been going for you?
I don't want to sound like, every other politician. I'm like, it's great. But actually it is. It actually is great. And I mean it. So this is my 6th general election. It's my 4th 4th as Member of Parliament, I think. And I think it's the best campaign that I've been involved in. And because I'm not running in a constituency this time, that's freed me up to travel around the country much more than I have previously been able to, and kind of be more of a cheerleader for our other candidates and campaigns, which I'm really loving. Our polls are looking as good as they ever have, ever. And, given that voting starts shortly, that's kind of a pretty good space to be in.
You're in Wellington Central. That's where you
that's right.
Yeah. Close to your heart.
It is. I grew up there. I grew up in Idle Valley, and I've stood there 2011, 2014, 2017, 2020.
Yep.
And so this is the first time in 12 years I haven't stood there. So it's a bit kind of bittersweet in that sense, but also Tamitha Paul is our candidate there, and she's running an amazing campaign, and we think she's probably going to win. And I'm not sure I could have, compared to her. I look at what she's doing, and I'm like, I don't think I could compete with Tamitha Paul. So, and that's really exciting. She's phenomenal. So I'm really looking forward to having her.
Really high energy wahine, right?
Yeah,
Who knows her things and
she really does. Yeah. She really does. It's she's one of these people she's so grounded in her values and what she stands for. And she's really clear about on whose behalf she is there. And not that she's kind of against anyone. She's not, but she's just really clear about that, which can be exclusive. I think some candidates try to be everything to everyone.
Yeah.
She doesn't.
Yeah.
And what that means is that she's actually getting support from people who aren't her kind of core group, because they respect that that's what she's there for. And it's sort of having its own, that's got its own attraction, which is like, well, I might not agree with you on everything, and I think you might be a little bit far out, but actually you're the kind of person I want, and they're responding to her leadership. Yeah. It's awesome. It's great.
It seems to be a skill nowadays in politics, which potentially maybe says something about our political system or the way in which politics has gone, to give a straight answer. That seems to be a skill.
Yes, it does. It does seem to be a skill.
I mean, what do you think about that? And what do you think about the state of politics in Aotearoa, New Zealand currently?
Well, I get a wee bit despondent about it. And I'm just going to be a little bit careful about this, because I don't want to put people off from voting.
Yeah, 100%.
Right? And I think some of what's going on at the moment is actually deliberately designed to turn people off.
Totally, I agree.
To get them to switch off and to suppress turnout. And I think that's appalling. But I mean, I look at, what some parties have got on offer, and it just feels like it's not connected to reality. It's not based on good evidence. It's like we tried that for the last 30 years. It didn't work then. What makes you think it's going to work again this time? It's incredibly short term, and I thought we were, at least as a country, starting to talk about some of the long-term challenges. So some of that I kind of worry about. And then I kind of think, is it better or worse than it's ever been? I don't know. I haven't been in, it's not like I'm Winston Peters. I haven't been around that long. So
4 decades.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I'll never come on Quite Simply Politics.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I always talk about that for
Yeah.
decades. I feel like, is there no one else better anywhere?
Yeah.
Like, sometimes we do have to cede leadership to other people,
Yeah.
but hey.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think there is a case for institutional memory, right? But I'm not sure that that's what he's bringing.
So you've been around the country. Where is, aside from here in Te Tutahi, Newmarket, where's your favourite place that you've been on the campaign trail?
Snap. Snap. That's a hard. Now I'm just going to annoy everybody else.
Or what are some of your favourite kaupapa that you've been at during the campaign trail?
Golly, those are really good conversations. I'll tell you what. So, memories of the campaign trail. I've done a few kind of big public meetings just about climate change.
Yeah.
Which haven't been kind of rah vote for the Greens or anything like that, but it's like let's talk about what's going on. Let's talk about the policy response. Let's talk about what we need to do as a country. And I know like it's my kind of mastermind specialist subject, but I've been really I've loved the way the audiences have sort of engaged with that, and part just in contrast to what I was just saying just now, that sense of that there are people who they acknowledge we're going through a bit of a tough time as a country, and a lot of people are finding it very tough right now, but there are people who are like, but this other thing ain't going away, and we need to deal with that as well. And so I've kind of really enjoyed getting into that. I went to the pub on Saturday in Dunedin. We went to the Emerson's Brewery with about, I don't know, a couple of dozen Green Party volunteers from down there. And it was just really, it was sort of one of those things, everyone had been out door knocking. I'd been kind of doing one of these big public meetings. I had a bunch of stuff on, and it was just like, well, let's just go and hang out. Because you can't really campaign on a Saturday night. But it was just a great opportunity to kind of spend a bit of quality time with people, because in a campaign you sort of flit in and out, and you kind of like, hey, how's it going? Haven't seen you for months, and then you're off again. So that was lovely actually, because these are people who they're not getting paid, they're going out in the freezing cold and the wind and the rain. Some of it can be quite brave because you're talking to other people about politics on their doorstops and so on, and they're really committed, and they're quite diverse, and they're quite quirky, and they're quite funny, and they just want a better world, and that's kind of like actually quite a nice way to spend a Saturday night.
Are you telling me you didn't want to go out and campaign in Oti Forte in the middle of the night at all the clubs
on a Saturday night?
Yeah.
No, I think you got to read the room. You don't want
to go in with like your big ribbon and say, hey guys.
Yeah.
Not for you.
No, and not for them actually. It's not about me. I don't. It's funny. In the last few weeks of the campaign, we'll be doing a bit of that kind of thing. So, generally, in the last couple of campaigns I've been involved in as co-leader, in the last few weeks, the kind of the machine's rolling, right? And there are very few interventions that you can make that are going to make a significant difference. So a lot of it's about building awareness. Have you voted? If you haven't, do you know where to go to vote? Blah blah blah. And so. It's one of the things in previous campaigns, which I'm sure I'll be doing a bit over the next few weeks, is actually dropping by some pubs, going and pulling some pints and serving coffee in the cafes and things around Wellington and Tamaki Makaurau and so on, just to kind of build that awareness, and that's also quite fun.
I can't remember who it was. I think it may have been Christopher Luxon pull a pint on One News. Yes. There was a lot of froth.
Yeah.
So, just keep an eye on that. There is an art to it.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, one of the things that I am super aware of is now the way that we need to sort of electrify the country, and we need to improve that. One of the things that was a big wake-up call for me was when we were both at Toru.
Yes.
And there was a session that you ran, and then one of the attendees stood up and said, who has the capacity here to have an electric vehicle?
Mm-hmm.
And most of us put up our hands.
Yes.
And then the question was,
that kind of crowd, right?
do you?
Yeah.
And then, for example, I put my hand down, and then the question was, well, why don't you?
Yeah.
And that was probably the first time that I've really checked, because I was like, that's a good point. I have the means and the capability. I need to do that.
Yeah.
So that is impending 6 months away to do that. What would you say to people who are sort of a little bit blasé about making those changes?
People who have the capacity to make those changes.
Yeah.
Because not everyone does, right?
No,
so
exactly. And that's a very defining factor, which is why the reason I'm like, I do have the capacity. I need to step up.
Well, and that's the thing, right? Is I think because not everybody can, those of us who can should.
Yeah.
And my experience is that the vast majority of people, and actually the data supports this, in this country are really worried about climate change. Most people are really confused about what they can do themselves to make a difference, but they do actually want to make a difference. Most people think that recycling is it, and you saw that in the leaders debate a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
Jessica Mackay asked the Christophers what they were doing at home, and they both said that they drove electric vehicles. Good, that's the primary source of your household emissions, and that they recycled, which makes no difference at all. And so, having good information, but I think that means that when it comes to transport, which is, like I say, that's the vast majority of any household's kind of pollution that goes into the atmosphere comes from the cars that we drive and how we get around. So if you can deal with that, you're 90% of the way there. So I think, what do I say to people who are a bit blasé? If you're worried about climate change, here is one thing you can do if you are one of the people who can do that.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting that I feel like sometimes the biggest changes that happen on your life are in the smallest moments, because it's almost like overload of data, overload of information, so many confusing things. And then it was just in that one conversation and I was like this, and then I was like this. And I thought, I have to take a responsibility here.
Yeah.
Because it's not just everyone else. It's me and everyone else.
Yeah.
Right?
It's why, the clean car discount, I think the reason why it's been so successful, and it is off the charts successful, is because it sent the signal, here's the thing to do. Like, here's one thing you can do. And, we'll give you a bit of a discount on that car to help you do it. But it was a really strong signal. And I think people have responded, that people are kind of going, great, like, finally, somebody's told me what I can do, and they're making it slightly easier to do it. So, yeah.
It's really interesting, too, when you look at it, because one of the things that you had mentioned when we interviewed you on Three Girls, One Beehive was that there is the policy around giving money to help some of these big polluters, reduce their pollution. Yeah. And as a fundamental principle, I don't like. Yeah, I'm not into that. But then one of the things that you said was, you're like, it might be ugly policy. Yes. But the emissions change is important. Yeah. So when I thought about it, I've thought about that line for weeks now since you said it, right? And I feel like sometimes, do you think we sometimes have politicians being a little bit too tricky, when even you could just use language like that might actually sound a little bit more reasonable to bring people along?
Well, I think, let me answer that another way. I think that there's this culture in politics which is reinforced in media, which is that we have to be right about everything all of the time.
Yeah, agree.
And actually, I think that you create an access for people where you say, we don't have it all worked out. Yeah. Where this is kind of the best that we've come up with, but we're kind of aware it's not awesome, right? It's not perfect, right? So we're going to give it a crack until somebody thinks of something better. And the way that I see it is that when you say that kind of thing, people go, "Oh, okay, fine." Right? But if you're trying to say, I've got the best thing since sliced bread and only I, have the way, the truth, and the light. It's like that's just like it's not true of anybody anywhere, and that's one of the reasons why I think it rings hollow, because it's just not true, actually. Yeah.
Because I have thought about that, and I will keep thinking about it because I'm still not sure if I want to be a purist on my values.
Well, I guess my point is you can be both, right? Because I think of myself as a purist, right? And on both kind of climate policy, economic policy, public policy, I'm like, this should be cleaner, this should be better, but it's not. So I'm gonna choose to kind of make some progress, and I'm going to try and work on the overall system setting. So this, the thing that you're talking about with New Zealand Steel and Fonterra and these other 70 odd companies that we've been supporting, co-investing with to get the emissions reductions. I think there is another way to do it. That will require legislative change. I have initiated the policy work on that. And if I'm in a position in the next term to do something about it, by the end of the next term, and hopefully before, we will have changed the legislation. That's 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
Now, we're up against the clock. So in the meantime, I'm going to go with ugly policy because it is making a difference. In fact, the New Zealand Steel thing, that electric arc furnace will be up and running in less time than it takes us to pass a bill through the House, right? So we'll actually have their 50% emissions reduction up and running through the ugly policy before I get the perfect policy sorted. And if you're talking about climate change, we just don't have time to kind of be like to wait until everything's perfect. Yeah. You just can't.
And that's why I've been thinking a lot about what you said, because it's like, actually, well, what do I want?
Yeah.
And for everything, it's not not actually what do I want, what do we need, actually, is what it is. And we need to do things faster.
Yeah, we do. And I mean, this is true of climate change. It's also true of a lot of other things that politics is often what's the least worst choice rather than what's the best choice. You've got a range of kind of suboptimal options in front of you. Well, some of those are least worst, some of them are worst. So don't do that. And you kind of, I just think you gotta be prepared to do that, because often there's just not a good option in front of you.
There was a debate that you were at recently, and I think it was the infrastructure debate.
Yeah.
Tell me what was going through your mind when you were sitting there, because I saw a lot of, and then you put the mic down because there was lots of characters in the room who had lots of things to say.
Yeah.
But talk me through what you were thinking and feeling in that debate, because I know that one of the things they tried to do was keep it very principled and sort of like, we're going to talk about the issues, but I did see an inkling of other things sort of starting to come in.
Yeah.
How did you
find It's a funny one, right? And so that was Tova O'Brien was moderating that one. Yeah. And she's a very good moderator. And I mean, when you say characters, we had Shane Jones in the room, and Simon Court, I think, who's character's not quite the word I'd use, but infrastructure's a really odd one, and I think I actually said it during the debate, because when you kind of drill into it, there's not a lot of difference or disagreement between any of the parties there about what actually needs to happen, at least at a kind of a high level, And in an election campaign, it's designed to highlight the differences so that people understand what the choices are. And so you end up in the situation where you're kind of nitpicking away at each other over small differences in order to try and define yourself and go, well, I think you should vote for me because my ideas are better than their ideas. And I hate that. I know it's democracy and everything, and we should keep that up. But that kind of side of politics really annoys me. So that was probably what you saw a bit of. And that kind of, when I was sort of thinking of saying something, a lot of that was to do with, in particular, the way that Simon Court and the ACT Party have conducted themselves in this election campaign, which is to say things that are so outrageous, and to say them with such conviction that they're right and literally everybody else is thick and wrong. It drives me up the wall. But it's a very deliberate strategy, because it means you spend the entire time talking about them and their stuff, when actually most of it's irrelevant because nobody agrees with them.
Yeah.
You know, so that's a really dangerous underbelly to election campaigns.
Absolutely.
Really
I mean, I've been quite vocal, especially in my column with National Business Review, which I now don't have because they're not taking opinions, and probably got something to do with it, but that's fine. As a wahine Māori in business, I take an absolute affront to trying to, one, demonise Māori who have done well in business by calling them the Māori elite, and or those who by virtue of the roles that they hold are somehow elitist, and two, to try to discourage the next generation of entrepreneurs to come into business to create greater opportunities and actually start to balance the tiller. These things, to me, I really feel like, especially from a business from a party that sees itself on the right, so therefore arguably is like business sympathetic, to say these things is a massive affront.
I agree, and they've sort of co-opted the language of business. They've co-opted the language of human rights, and in a way that's really insidious because it flips it on its head. You know, co-opted the language of freedom of speech in order to say, you know, I have the absolute right to say whatever I want, and you have no right to kind of counterbalance that. No, it is really worrying because it's the kind of imported US culture war, you know, and we're seeing, you know, New Zealand is often, I mean, I love us, but we're often a wee bit behind the trend, you know, and so we kind of look at what's going on in the US and the UK and Canada and Australia, and we're like, oh, thank God that's not happening here. Except that it's just not happening here yet. And we don't really have an immune system for it, because we're kind of like, oh, well, you know, that's not going to happen here because we're special, right? No, we're exactly the same set of circumstances here. And a lot of those kind of institutions that are driving that kind of culture war have got kind of global ambitions, right? They're not just purely domestic to the US or Russia. They're you know, kind of, and you know, little old Aotearoa, we need to kind of get our act together, I think.
I mean, I don't want to hammer this point home like too much, but I mean, I feel like sometimes we're a little bit naive in the way that we perceive things, and like you say, because we are so far away, then we think, oh no, but the world is connected.
Yeah, it is.
People are feeding information constantly, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth.
And misinformation.
Yeah. Or disinformation. All of it. And it's all just as grotesque.
Yes, it is.
You know?
Yeah, it is.
And then even to see it infiltrate RNZ. It scares me.
Yeah.
Because then you go, that's a state-funded organisation, part of the Fourth Estate, that has an absolute high duty to the people it serves, not to the crown, not to anyone, to the people.
Advertisers.
And then that is now being found to be at siege.
Yeah, which isn't to say that we shouldn't trust it, right?
No.
But you're right. And I think, I mean, I've sort of been scratching my head about all of this, and I know that there are kind of, you know, academic institutions and others that are, you know, putting some effort into this. But I think as a country, we need to kind of go, what's actually going on here? Like, what's, you know, can we just do a bit of a risk assessment, please? And then sort of work out how do you respond to that. One of the countries I think does well on this is Finland. It's always the Scandies, of course. But Finland has developed this over decades because, of course, they had Russian propaganda since after World War II, right? Because the Soviet Union was trying to draw and colonize Finland in the same way that it had with, you know, Eastern Europe. And so the Finns over decades actually built up, well, how do we respond? How do we have a open and pluralistic democratic society with freedom of speech when you've got this bad actor on your border who is actively feeding propaganda, misinformation, disinformation, and so on into the system. And so this didn't happen quickly. You know, it's kind of been developed over a long time, and it starts in their schools with critical thinking. You know, and
one of my favourite things.
Yeah,
which seems to be we're not encouraging it anymore.
No, you know, but what am I looking at?
Yeah,
You know,
yeah. Where has this come from?
Where
what
has
is
this
the
come
root
from?
of it?
Who is saying it? You know, and if I share it, you know, what could the consequences be? Just those sort of processes, and they've got great public broadcasting. They do all the other things as well, but they've really worked at that, and it really seems to, you know, it seems to be working. And so I think that we should look to examples like that. You know, the kind of counter view is who should lead it, because if the government does it, then that just reinforces all the conspiracy nuts who are like, oh, the government's telling us what to think. You know.
True.
So
I don't have an answer for you.
No, do I. Let's just sit here and quietly drink our tea.
I would say perhaps business is not the best place to run it either, given I am part of the business community and I watch this stuff.
Yeah, well, no, true, but I do think in businesses it would be worthwhile, you know, kind of thinking about these issues as well, as applies to as a workforce matter, right? Because businesses are a community, right? Company, you know, with the origin of the word company, com pane, with bread, those with whom we break bread, right? That's where the word company comes from.
I love that.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So when you kind of get back to that, those with whom we break bread, it's a social construct, right? It's a social entity, and so, you know, I think businesses, you know, we talk a lot about organizational culture. We put huge amounts of resources into that kind of thing. So it's not unfamiliar for us to think about the team, and what's going on. And we've gotten better, I think, at thinking of people not just as sort of employees and economic units, but as human beings who've got other stuff going on at home, you know, and so on. This kind of ugly trend in politics and in society and in social media is affecting them, affecting the people you work with, and so on. So it's not like businesses have no role in thinking about this.
Do your kaimahi, do they push back on you?
Yeah.
Because my kaimahi push back on me all the time. It's so good.
Yeah.
They'll be like, why are you grumpy about that? And I'll be like, oh, and then, but yeah, so yours push back on you?
Yeah, they do. It's taken them years to train me, but yeah, I mean, it's one of the things that, you know, I joke, like, it's one of the things I pay them to do.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I God, for God's sake, don't leave me to my own devices.
Yeah.
No, I think it's the first rule in business, in public service, and in politics, wherever you are, is to make sure that you've got people around you who will challenge you. Not sort of for the sake of being objectionable, but for the sake of sharpening ourselves up and doing better, you know. And hiring, I mean, I'm not an expert in everything, right? So, you know, we've got people who are absolute experts in policy, absolute experts in communications, absolute experts in administration and logistics, absolute experts in community outreach and you know, organizing. I'm not an expert in any of those things. I mean, I kind of probably know enough to be dangerous in any one of those because, you know, the nature of my job. But, you know, you hire people because they're good at what they do and they're better than you at it.
I just feel like it would be a sad day, especially within my parka here, within my business, when my kaimahi didn't push back on things and say, like, what's happening here? What are we doing this for? Why is this the reason? Yeah. You know? Do you think that we have enough of that in politics?
Well, it probably varies place to place. I mean, I know that there are MPs and ministers and managers in the public service who have reputations as, they don't like people who disagree with them. And that has a real suppressive effect on, in particular in the public service. And I think that's dangerous. I think we have to recognise our limitations. You have to understand what the outcome is that you want to achieve. But there's a reason why we have 400 policy people. It's because actually they can take that sort of outcome and go, all right, here are the ways in which we can reach that. Here are the different benefits and costs of those. It's always your choice at the end of the day, but we would seriously recommend going this way to get there rather than that way to get there for the following reasons. And you're still free to go, okay, thanks for your advice, I'm going to take the other way. Yeah. But then it's like, that's on your head. Yeah. And that's fine, right? That's kind of the point. Yeah. But you should always, But I know that there are people like that, but I don't think it's a universal truth. I also know that there are people who are really good at kind of listening to the evidence and actually even kind of saying actually the objective was wrong in the first place. And that's a tough one for a politician because it might have been a campaign promise. Yeah, true. And you have to, I think you've got to be big enough to kind of go, look, I know we said that, but we've learned some things since, and here it is. And actually, we've changed our minds.
Have you done that? And is there a time when you can?
Well, I know that I have. Yeah. And I'm struggling now with a specific example.
That's all right. You don't have to have an example.
Well, I'll give you one, which is, so in my time as climate change minister, I've become more convinced. So I used to think that carbon taxes were better policy than emissions trading schemes, cap and trade schemes. Yeah. I now have the opposite view.
Oh, really?
Very, very strongly held opposite view. Yeah.
What changed that?
Yeah. Well, I used to think that carbon taxes were better because they were simpler. Yeah. Because they were more predictable for businesses. Yeah. You could sort of say, well, we start at this price and it'll crank up by, however many dollars a year and blah, blah, blah. But the two things I think that cap and trade schemes have over that are, first, that there's an actual cap, right? And you can't, with a carbon tax, you have to model this, and modeling is rubbish. So you kind of go, well, we think there is a price point at which businesses will probably change their behavior. Maybe, and then you get to that point, you're like, oh, well, that didn't work. But we don't have time for that, right? So you've got to say, actually, you've got to be able to set a cap and have that, and pretty much be able to guarantee that things are going to work within that cap, and that cap gets smaller over time. And the second one is related, which is with a carbon tax, the politician sets the price. That is a bad idea, right? Yeah, 100%. Especially because it has to increase. And frankly, I do not have faith in politicians to set prices. And,
totally agree.
And particularly on industry, when you've got massive amounts of lobbying going on,
100%,
they just won't do it. Yep. And so a cap and trade scheme says, the politicians say, well, look, we're not going to set the price. That's actually over to you. You work out the price. If you can work out how to get your pollution down, then you don't pay anything at all, or if you need a little bit, then the price will be lower. If you need a lot, the price will be higher. That's just supply and demand. And then just kind of leave people to it. Yeah. And I think that encourages innovation, and people kind of understand what the boundary is. And there's still, trust me, there's plenty of lobbying. But
those pesky lobbyists.
Well, it's the thing that kind of, at one level it's fine, but at another level I get sort of irritated with all of these businesses that come to me and say, we're really committed to climate change. We really think net zero is really important, and we also really think that our industry shouldn't have an exemption. It should have an exemption. Yeah.
We don't have to participate. So it's all the rest of them.
It's like it's everybody else. Yeah. And it's just really hard for us, And if every single one says that, I'm like,
cool.
Just go and deal with it, would you? Come on.
Could not agree more.
Yeah.
Like, we need to do better.
Yeah. It just gets really irritating. It's like, well, just...
Like, it's all very well to have a tohu on your website, something that shows that you're this and you're committed to this.
Yeah.
But the rubber hits the road when you're actually doing things.
Yeah.
So it's like, cool, sign up to things, but actually do things.
Yeah, it's also not that hard.
Yeah.
For most businesses, right? It's or for most industries. For most industries, there is a replacement technology, which if you use it, it might have some capex involved, but if you use it, probably your OPEX will be lower. You'll probably be more productive.
Yeah.
You know, it's just inconvenient.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
But tell you what, climate change is really inconvenient.
Yeah. Short-term inconvenience
Yes.
for long-term gain, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we're going to wrap up.
So that's one example.
I love it. I think to think about things like that, because I'm constantly trying to do that to myself too, is a great, I don't want to say a great skill, but it's a good thing.
Yeah.
It's a really good thing. We are going to wrap up shortly. We have got to do the bowl of bravery, which is where...
The bowl of bravery.
Which is
Did
where...
I know about this before?
I promise you they're not that bad.
Okay, all right.
But it's where we've got a campaign questions, campaign-based questions.
Yeah.
Now, when Mark Mitchell did this, he chose a blue one.
Yeah.
So over to you if you choose a green one. But
are they color-coded for a reason? Or
no.
You've just got like...
No, I just chose all the colors on like the 4 main political parties, and then I just wrote whatever.
Okay.
Yeah. So you can blame me if you don't like the question. But before we do that, I just wanted to give you the opportunity to share any sort of final thoughts before we do the bowl of bravery. Is there anything that you really want listeners and our watchers to take with them?
Yeah, and this is going to sound a little bit like a party political broadcast, but
that's all right.
But it's also something that I believe in really strongly, which is kind of driving our campaign at the moment, but it also drives me in politics, which is the question of why it is you would choose to only solve half a problem. Right? Like if you look at what this election campaign is about, it's virtually for virtually every party, we're going to make things a little bit better. Right? We're going to lift X number of children out of poverty, but not all children out of poverty. Why? I mean, that's just a political choice. And so it's something that we're kind of saying, well, no, actually, why don't we kind of go, no, we're going to lift every child out of poverty. We're going to make sure that everybody has a house to call home that's warm and dry and, safe.
Yeah.
We're going to ensure that everybody has dental, not just people under the age of 30, because actually people over the age of 30 have teeth as well. It confuses me why that seems to be why that sort of view of the world is so strong in this country. So I'm hoping that we get the chance to say, no, actually, let's take on some of these challenges and actually fix them.
Mr. Shaw, you've given me something else to think about, because I always think about incrementalism as something that I think is arguably sometimes can get the detractors on board too. Yes. But you're essentially saying death by incrementalism. Yeah, that one.
Yeah, it's well, the question is, if you choose to solve half a problem, you're choosing to leave the other half of the problem in place.
Okay. Why would you do that?
Why would you do that? And what does that say about those people for whom you've said?
Well, yes, no, that's true.
We're going to get to these people, but we're not going to get to those people.
No, that is dead right, because I do think about that in terms of the discussion about sort of benefits and I actually, as far as I'm concerned, am far more interested in business evading tax and that kind of stuff than people on benefit.
Yeah, no kidding.
Like, I don't really care. Like, I'm sorry, I know that's quite flippant, but I just don't. That's not really where I'm interested in.
Yeah.
I think there's far more harm being done at the other end.
Yeah.
But, okay. Ready? Are we ready to go?
A bowl of bravery. All right, I'm gonna close my eyes so that I'm colorblind as to what. One.
Yeah.
And it's green. How about that? Okay. What is one campaign technique you want to try but are too scared? Well. That's an interesting question. What's one campaign technique you think is a good idea but are too scared to try?
God, I love it. I can hear your brain thinking.
Yeah, well,
TikTok dance? No.
Well, I was going to say, I was actually going to say anything that involves food. You know, I did a thing with Charlotte Cook on RNZ.
Yes,
a wee while
I
ago.
love that
Me
series.
and Martima did this, like a cooking show with politics. I found it so hard because, let's just say I'm not the world's most natural chef, and so I was kind of working really hard to make sure that sort of worked. And then Charlotte was asking, political questions on top, and like my brain could not do both things at the same time. So that and eating ice creams, just stay away.
Yeah.
Frankly, yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
What about TikTok?
Actually, so I don't have a TikTok account.
No.
Green Party campaign has a TikTok account. I was doing a video podcast for Otago politics students recently, and they've got a full media studio at the university that they take over. And we did this like hour-long show.
Yeah.
And then at the end of it, we sort of wrapped up, and they said, "Oh, by the way, we've got this TikTok account that we use to kind of drive people to the show, which is on YouTube. So we're just going to do a short video for TikTok." I was like, "Yeah, fine, whatever." And she said, we're just going to ask you one question, and you just need to respond to the question however best you can. I'm like, all right, okay, fine. And keep in mind, I know nothing about what's going on TikTok, right? I have no idea. And she said, "How often do you think about the Roman Empire?" I know. See, you like me aren't aware of TikTok trends. And I was like, well, I think about the Roman Empire every day. And they all burst out laughing. And I said, well, why is that? Because most people don't know this, but the reason why the Roman Empire collapsed was because the senators, who were the landowners, wouldn't pay enough taxes to hire a proper army to defend them from the barbarians.
Mm-hmm.
Sound familiar?
Mm-hmm.
And so every day I'm like, I want our civilization to succeed. And what that means is people need to pay their taxes, right? And so that was the video, and they all burst out laughing and applauded. And I'm like, okay, cool, whatever. And then I went back to our social media team, and I'm like, is there any particular reason why people would have asked me about the Roman Empire? And they said, yeah, there's this whole trend going on, which is that apparently men think about the Roman Empire more than, like, women don't think about the Roman Empire. Men do. And there's this whole trend on TikTok of like girlfriends going up to boyfriends and saying, how often do you think about the Roman Empire? So I'm like, So apparently I will do TikTok. I just don't necessarily know what I'm doing. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh, well, one thing I will say is that the Green Party social is top notch, and it has been top notch for years.
Yeah.
So shout out to the Green social team.
I'll pass that on.
They are honestly, it's exemplary, and they can jump on things like that.
Yeah.
I just think, kudos to them, because it's like the actual strength in their game is incredible.
It is. It's phenomenal. We're very, very proud of them.
Yeah. So if people want to reach out to you, where's the best place for them to touch base with you?
For me personally, I actually just always say, send me an email.
Yeah.
james.shaw@parliament.gov.nz. That'll get picked up by someone in the office, and we find ways of kind of dealing with all of that traffic. Yeah. I generally, like I know I get not TikTok, I get like Facebook messages and Twitter messages and Instagram messages and all that kind of stuff. I can't handle it.
Yeah.
So often it's actually just get in touch with the office. Okay. Actually, just drop me an email.
Awesome. Any final thoughts?
Just thank you for having me on the show. I think what you do is great. I think it's really important to have this kind of thing. I think creates a sort of an accessibility for normal humans to engage with the otherwise arcane world of politics. And it's really important, especially right now with what's going on.
And it's pretty.
It's real pretty. Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on, and I absolutely hope that you'll join us again. Marama and I made a commitment that we would do one next year in Te Reo Māori. So I'm trying to think of what a commitment that we could make. Potentially talking about the Roman Empire. I don't know.
Let's get back on that.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
But thank you so much for joining us. I hope that you have an amazing rest of your day campaigning up here in Tamaki. And that is it for our fourth and final episode in our campaign election series. We touched on a lot of things. Not a lot of campaigning, but a little bit of campaigning, thinking about the ways in which politics is working in Aotearoa New Zealand. And remember, if you enjoyed it, like, subscribe, and share it with everyone. And we're going to take a little bit of a break now. We're probably going to take about 2 weeks break after the election, just to recuperate, recover, see what happens. And then we will be back on board with season 2 of Quite Simply Politics. We'll see you again. Ka kite!